And then you guys can see the slides that I have here.
Yep.
Okay, great. So welcome everybody to our webinar on selecting a co-manufacturer from a startup perspective. I'm really excited about today's conversation. There's been a lot of interest from people across the pet care space about learning how to work with a co-man. And so James and Rich are two startups that I've worked closely with over the last, I don't know, year or so. And they both have been sharing with me their trials and tribulations. So we thought we'd put together a webinar. And I see that John, I always pronounce his name, Kunze is on, who also has some startup, some co-man experience. Maybe he can add some insight later on in the conversation. But welcome to James and Rich. We're going to get to their presentation in a sec. First, a couple of housekeeping. It's going to be about a 30-minute presentation. You can ask your windows in the chat at any time, though it looks like we have about 10 or 15 people, so we might even actually ask you to unmute and ask your question live. The session is being recorded, just an FYI. This is the first time that we're doing this, so let us know how it goes afterwards, and we're happy to steer the conversation in any direction that you all want to go in. A little bit about Leap Ventures for those of you who are new to what we do. We are really here to serve the pet care startup ecosystem. Our goal is to provide the resources that you all need to get to the next level, whatever the next level is. And we do that through two different kind of programs. One is called Leap Venture Academy, which this webinar is a part of. These are kind of free services, webinars, classes, meetups, pitch competitions, boot camps, all free to the participants with the goal of trying to get them to the next level. And then we have our Leap Venture Studio, which is an accelerator program, a typical accelerator program, but specific on pet care startups. We invest up to $200,000 in the startups to bring them to LA for a 3-month program. James actually on the call went through that. Rich, who is the other co-host, just went through our pitch competition at Super Zoo. So really, these are two people that are all about this community and really supportive of what we're trying to do. This is a partnership between two organizations, Michelson Found Animals, which is a really cool social nonprofit based out of LA. They're doing amazing things. They have a micro-registry, national micro-registry service. They have 2 shelter rescues and just an amazing kind of nonprofit with a social impact mission. And then Kinship, which is a division of Mars Pet Care. Kinship is the innovation arm of the organization, and we're really working with startups and trying to kind of invent the new alongside all of you. Happy to chat more about what we're doing at any time with anybody that's interested. And without further ado, we're going to just kind of get started with James and Rich on this conversation on co-manufacturing. So Rich and James, I can control the slides. Just tell me when to move them, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Awesome. Given that I see Shameless Pets, are these the couple slides for Shameless first? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Hey everyone, James Bello, co-founder of Shameless Pets. So if you just go to the next slide, I'll tell you just real quick about what we're doing at Shameless. So we have this idea of launching all natural grain-free dog treats, but our mission is around fighting food waste. So what that means is we utilize upcycled ingredients. Upcycled ingredients are foods and ingredients that we go out into the supply chain, upwards into the supply chain to go rescue from instead going to landfill. So we work with farmers taking, let's say, uglies or overproductions. So rescuing those from going to landfill or working with food processors, think juicing manufacturers, things along those lines that there's byproducts that they're currently right now just sending to landfill, but are perfectly healthy. So we've developed a supply chain to put in place to go rescue those ingredients and then put it into the 4 treats that you currently see. And so right now we have these 4 flavors in market, we're in about 700 stores at the moment. We're moving next year. We'll be in about 2,500 stores. So we're kind of in the process of scaling up at the moment. We are also now launching, or we will have for next year, 5 new flavors. So we'll have 9 total flavors that we'll have. And then we'll have about 12 different upcycled ingredients that cross those 9 flavors. And obviously, pertaining to this call, all of this is produced with a co-manufacturer. So I thought the easiest way to kind of go through this, Assad, in the next slide, was just to kind of walk you through where we have been on our journey. And I think a little bit is just a little bit of grounding on just the time that it's taken for us to bring this product to market. And then more specifically, how we've worked with our co-mans. We've actually had 2 co-mans in the, call it 18 to 24 months that we've been around. So real quick, as you can see kind of left to right on the screen, in June of 2017 was when we came up with our idea. So we were like, all right, we have something. There's a product concept that we have. We know that consumers like the idea because we were baking it in our own kitchen and walking it around. But really at that point, we hadn't worked with a co-man whatsoever. We were just more in the ideation stage. Fast forward to October. That's when we started looking for manufacturers. And honestly, we just started on Google, which I think a lot of people will probably wind up doing, is literally just getting on Google and trying to figure out who are the co-mans and trying to get smart on that. We ultimately went with a pretty small co-man who got behind what we were doing and was willing to work with us on that. The way that we structured that agreement is that they were essentially going to source all of the material. So even the upcycled material, we would set the supply chain, put our own quality control efforts in place, and then they would go source it. So that model, they were sourcing all of our ingredients. Then as you see, we went into production. So now we jump ahead a few more months, about 4 months in February. And what you can see there is the cost came in too high. So I will have another slide talking about our learnings. But essentially, we were in multiple negotiations with different retailers with the assumption of what our costs were going to be after the production came back. It was, I wouldn't say double, but close to double what the costs were. So we essentially lost a lot of the negotiations that we were within our retailers. So at that point, we knew we essentially had to pause and go find a new co-man based on the channels that we wanted to go enter into and the costs that we needed to hit to ensure that we could get listed with those retailers. So then we started a whole new search to find a new co-man. So essentially what I did is started working with the network that I had developed since the year prior and started making a ton of calls. I was literally on the phone for about a month, just talking to a ton of different co-mans, trying to figure out where their minimums were set, what their costing looked like. Essentially then what I did was I personally went to Global Pet Expo. I had a prioritized list of what you can see here. There was 2 co-mans that I really wanted to go meet. So I went to Global on the visitor's pass for 1 day and just targeted those 2 co-mans to go sell my story and see if we could light up some business together. And then you can see in May, we were lucky enough to land one of the co-mans. And then we worked on our reformulations. So our first co-man let us basically formulate whatever we wanted to, which I think led to our costing issues. This one, we did a lot of pre-work on reformulating to make sure that the formulations were dialed in for this co-man. And because of that, our costing came in much better. And then as you can see, our final stage was we had product and now I was able to go take that product out to retailers and start pitching it and be pretty confident of where we were at from the 4 flavors that we had. So that in a nutshell is our journey. I think the key highlights here are, if you look at the timing that's involved, it wasn't like a 2-month process. Hopefully you guys ask some questions. I'll share some of the learnings that I had that for you guys, you might be able to shrink the timing that we had. But definitely plan ahead on this process. It's it can be very frustrating at times. It can take a lot longer. We're all new startups, so we don't mean a whole heck of a lot to a lot of these co-mans out there. So it just takes time.
James,
and then it's, yeah. Oh, go for it. Yeah.
I was going to just quickly ask, can you share a little bit about your background? Because you at least know supply chain a little bit in your background, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to Shameless Pets, I was at Target. So headquarters at Target, I was a buyer as well as in their sourcing team. So I spent on and off about 12 years at Target. And then my co-founder was a product developer and food scientist who was working with a brand out in California called Mary's Gone Crackers, so in the human food space. But essentially, she was their head of R&D, so putting together formulations and then working with manufacturers. For them, they actually had their own manufacturing, so they were vertically integrated. But her kind of expertise is taking at-home recipes and scaling them via manufacturing. So we thought entering into this process that we were just going to absolutely nail it. We had everything locked and loaded, good to go. And we were like, as you can see, that February 18, we thought we were launching and we were going to be in 2,000 stores. And then everything kind of came crashing down on us with this. So yeah, we thought we had some background. We do. We knew what we were getting into, but we've learned a ton along the way.
Great. Rich, were you going to say something?
No, but I will. Yeah, no, I'm just listening to James' story, and we're a little bit earlier than Shameless. We're getting to launch our first product this winter, but I think I'll take stock in some of the lessons learned and things that James has outlined for, I think, what's to come once we get through the first gate of that formal commercial production.
So James, you want to talk about your journey and then we can go to learnings from both of you guys after that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm Rich Kelleman. I'm the co-founder of Bond Pet Foods based in Boulder, Colorado. And what we're doing and our whole proposition is working with biotechnology to make pet food from microbial and animal proteins like chicken, turkey, and fish. But we're essentially removing that farm animal in the conventional sense from the supply chain. We're brewing these proteins, and we're taking this approach for a number of reasons. Primarily because of the challenges that are attached to meat production and the production of meat products when it comes to farm animal welfare, sustainability, and safety. And I think most relevant to this conversation, aside from our ingredient spec, is maybe the journey that we've been to produce food that's in a format that is a bit novel. It doesn't quite fit into the systems of what most co-manufacturers have laid out on the line today, and that's in what you see here. It's a protein bar, and it seems very familiar to us because it looks very much like a candy bar. But when it comes to pet food facilities, this is something that I think makes a lot of people who are on the floor very frustrated, just because it's an unusual profile for them to work with. So that may or may not be relevant to some of you that are on the line right now if you're looking for a different type of specification aside from the ingredient itself. But yeah, let me take you through a little bit of some of the things that we've learned. And I think a lot of this echoes what James talked about with his journey. I think first and foremost, and James mentioned this, we're at this stage in our development, and most of you will be as well, we're low man on the totem pole. We don't have a ton of leverage with a lot of these co-manufacturers, so you can't go in and demand, hey, this is what I want to do. So just be sensitive and mindful of that. The co-manufacturer that we ultimately went with mentioned this to us, that she gets calls from startups like ourselves, a dozen or more a day. So number one, they don't return all those calls right away. They usually get to them in due time. And when they do, it's those who are fairly persistent and showing that this is something that they're serious about. And then when they do start that dialogue, the other thing that our co-man mentioned was that once they start talking about costs and the need for an initial deposit of, say, something like $1,000, a lot of people that have been buzzing in their ear tend to drop off then. And that's when they know, even at that small screen, who's serious and who's worth their time and engagement. So I think that this first point is critical, because you have to make sure that you're persistent, that you're communicating exactly what you're trying to make with your foods and as a company, and how that might be different than the million other people that are calling them on any given day and week, just so that you can get their ear and get their time. On the flip side, and James alluded to this as well, it's not just something where you call a couple of co-mans and then you've got it and then it's plug and play, right? It's something that takes quite a bit of time and effort and research to make sure that this partner is somebody who can truly suit your needs, not to just develop this product, but even on the back end, if you need that to help execute various aspects of logistics and distribution. So really ask a lot of questions about their processing capabilities and their limitations as it relates to your ingredient specification and format. Give some real thought to the location of the facility. It seems like a small thing in some ways, but you're going to want to have a presence on site so that you can get to understand in person exactly what they're capable of and where things could be an issue down the track as you look at your broader product portfolio and how that evolves over time. And then if you're looking at national distribution initially, another consideration is if they do have logistics and distribution opportunities on site, or if they have a partner that you could tap into, number one. But then if they're located on the coasts, that could add quite a bit if you're shipping all the way across the country to your ultimate bottom line and the margins that you might have to give up on a cost per ship. So another thing to consider. And then, as James said, the other thing is with the overall cost structure is look at the minimum quantities that they require with any kind of relationship. I think a lot of them that are out there that are fairly well established have minimums that are quite high, 20,000 pounds or more. Some expect you to make 6 to 8 runs a year on top of that. So for us, that would mean that we would be swimming in bars. And it's that's something that won't work for us. But there are some that will initially take smaller runs of 1,500 pounds and ramp up with you as you grow. It'll be a bit more costly, but it will be something that I think, based on budgets and what you have to work with from a resources standpoint, that could be more manageable. So do your homework, ask these questions, get a full picture of what you might be looking at compared to some other co-mans that are out there.
If I could add one thing, Rich, you had on that one, your pilot and minimum quantity runs, just to call out for other startups. Our co-man, the new co-man that we have, is very used to running very large runs just to nail the formulation. We, because of capital restraints, we do trial runs and then put it into market. So that's one other thing to really be thinking about as you're thinking through what a trial run looks like. And if you want to go put it into market, we actually, the first run that we put in market, we actually, I wish I didn't do that. The product was not what we wanted it to be. So I think that's an awesome learning on just make sure that you are cognizant of that and have the capital ready to put it forward, or run the risk of, like us, putting less than optimal product out into the market.
Yeah. I mean, we can't kind of stress that enough. When we look at, and this is a bit repetitive, but it is the reality, especially with companies that might be just starting off and that don't have a considerable amount of leverage. Co-manufacturers don't like disruption. They are looking for interesting food concepts and things that they could get some traction and in the spirit of being able to grow with you and take advantage of that opportunity. But if it's too disruptive, if you're looking at a new format, if you're using ingredients that may be hard to source and procure, if structurally, depending on the experience that you're looking for, it's a challenging exercise, then it might be difficult to get a co-man's attention unless you have thought through a lot of these things on your own and you could give them some guidance and counsel with that. Some co-mans are willing to go off script, but it usually does come at a cost. So for example, that bar that we're going with, it's a custom plate, it's a custom die, and something like that, you'd have to accommodate $10,000 to $20,000 for something like that, and then to make that and to go through that collaboration, it's something that also takes time, up to 2 months, to get that dyed where you want it to and go through production and have it something that you can use on the line. So take that into account as well. Wholly custom is often a non-starter. Like I said, if you're looking to fully rejig how they do their business, that's probably not something that they would be wholly receptive to. And then I think at the end of the day, just know that the handful of things that you are unwilling to budge on because it's part of your core proposition. So if it's in James' case with the ingredient specification of upcycling and getting those right ingredients for him, for us, it's about the microbial protein, but also the structural integrity of this final product that we're looking for. Know what those things are so that if they're not willing to accommodate, you could quickly move on. Where to find a partner? Yeah, of course, networking and referrals is probably, it's at the bottom of this, but it's probably your best bet if, as you get more entrenched in this community here and the pet food space overall, that those personal contacts have a better chance of you getting a co-man to listen if they know it's coming from somebody that they trust. But there are other resources as well. A partner slate is one that I think is worth checking out. They charge $30 a month or $100 a month so $30 a month to have access to their database, which includes human food companies and co-mans, as well as pet food co-mans. But then for $100, they'll actually make some introductions for you. So that's something worth checking out. You could do it month to month and cancel anytime. We actually got referred to them by Naturally Boulder, which is an NGO here that's trying to help food startups in our community. So there's somebody to look at. Industry websites, petfoodindustry.com has a directory that you could sort through. And I think there's a description of some of those companies as well, so you can get a sense of their baseline capabilities. As Jane mentioned, Global Pet and Pet Food Forum are great places to press the flesh and talk to these people directly and see if with some more in-depth conversation, they may be a good fit. But this gives you at least a handful of places to look and start your inquiry if you haven't already.
So my understanding right now
and then the only other thing I might say is, again, especially if you're relatively new and you're starting out, my feeling is don't put all of your eggs in one basket, just because things don't always go to plan. From a product development standpoint, anticipate product challenges and be prepared to serve up alternatives to your ingredient deck or the format, or being open to your co-man's input if things are going sideways, just so that you can get that product to where you need it to be. And one example, we have a a commercial kitchen that we've been working with here in Boulder to develop this initial protein bar, and things on a very small scale look beautiful, taste good. We were even eating these as snacks, as they were coming off the line. And so we knew that the recipe was what we needed and what we wanted. But once we transferred it to a higher volume facility with slightly different equipment, it didn't work the same way. And, I was tears crying at our co-mans because I was watching everything get pressed out of the machine and then get into that high-speed conveyor belt and just break apart. It couldn't really accommodate the torque and the pressure of what they had. So we had to make some adjustments to make it fit with that new reality. So being open to that back and forth with your co-man, or if you have the resources on your team or your bench to work through some of those issues, know that that will likely happen, and be willing to take that journey. With that, over budget for early pilot and production runs to leave room for that discovery. And then finally, it's not unusual to be bumped or moved in the production queue. It can happen. So if you can, vet multiple co-mans and build those relationships, and just in case you've made these commitments, you've made these promises, and you're beholden to the schedule of this one co-man, if you can get it through another, that's always a backup is always good to have. And that's what we've done as well. We have some relationships with folks in Colorado in case we run into that issue in the coming weeks and months.
Great. Thanks, Rich. I know we have some questions coming in. I'm going to have James kind of go through his learnings. And I kind of did this out of order, I realized, but we'll get the questions.
I'll keep it short because I think, Rich, you nailed almost all of the ones that I had. The way I thought through it was just based on our journey as we were super early stage to where we are now. So starting on the left, like the learning I had as we started was start working to find a co-man earlier than you think you need to. Like I said, we thought we knew what all the ingredients needed to look like. We thought we knew what our manufacturing was going to be. And then, like Rich mentioned, certain molds will come into play. We didn't have the capital to afford those molds. So that changed bake times. That changed a lot of different things from a format standpoint. So learning is just start reaching out to co-mans before you think you need to start understanding where their capabilities look like. Then the next one, we honestly, because we were just so excited about our product and wanted to bring it to market, speaking frankly, we jumped into that first relationship a little too quick because it was essentially the first co-man to say yes and seemed really interested in what we were doing. We didn't talk about the scenarios of costing coming too high, timing issues taking place, ingredient sourcing challenges. So what we talked about was all of the success that we were going to have and how we were just going to go take it to market and crush it. And we were going to be the best friends in the world. So there I would say, make sure you talk about all the scenarios. More importantly, the tough ones that will inevitably come up so you get a better sense of how that co-man will respond. And you'll either like it or not like it. And then that's kind of allowing you to make a gut decision on if they're the right partner to move forward with. Coming to the costs, I think what wound up happening for us is because the format changed, because baking challenges came up with what our ideal formulation was, we had to change the formulation, which rose our costs. So I would say make sure that before you go into final formulation that you are absolutely talking about what your costs are going to be and kind of holding them and yourself to the fire on this is what the costing is to build your business around that. And then the other thing is listen to their feedback on your formulations. We really didn't in the beginning, so I would say that was a fault on us. We thought we had it perfectly done. So that's something that we wound up doing with the next co-man. But I think the other precursor there is don't take everything they say as the truth. Like there are definitely, to Rich's point, the non-negotiables that you need to make sure that you're standing firm on and you're having those conversations, and you'll very quickly see that's a co-man that will be willing to work with you, or if you have to go find somebody else. But definitely listen to what they're saying, because ultimately they're trying to help. They're not trying to hurt you or anything along those lines. And then Rich, you nailed this one. Like, honestly, you got to sell your idea to them. We are nothing to them right now. I mean, our co-man's running, 15 to 20 container loads every production run, and we're asking for basically 10 pallets. So you got to sell. You got to make sure that they're bought into what you're doing and then where your growth plans are going. So just make sure that you're selling it. They don't need your business. You need theirs. So you got to make sure that you're kind of going into that relationship and with that in mind. I hit on the non-negotiables, and then my video screen is in front of, what is the, Sod, I can't even see what's the last one say?
Produce and ship first retailer. The process takes a lot longer than you expect.
Yeah, I touched on that one already. Yeah, like we were starting, a lot of this, obviously, as you're starting up, is sell-in, right? So you got to sell your idea before you have it. Just don't make any, don't confirm you're going to have product before you know you're going to have product. How about that? And make sure that you understand that there's going to be hiccups along the way, and plan for those. So, and then I saw one of the questions that came in was around costing.
Yeah.
So just so you know, we have a retail price point that we have to hit in market, and we knew what our wholesale cost had to look like to provide them with their margins. And we tackle within the FDM channel. So within FDM, they're looking for anywhere from 40 to 50 points of margin. So we knew we had to hit a certain wholesale cost, and then we knew what our margins needed to look like to make sure that we were able to run a profitable business. To the question's point on that, we could spend money to go market and get our awareness of the product out. So that's where I was talking about our costing. I'm just going to throw out a number because this isn't the number, but we expected our COGS to be $5, and they came in at $6.50, and it just wasn't attainable for us to actually go drive the business at that point, because we were fully bootstrapped up until just recently. So it was our money, and we didn't want to start a business that was unprofitable.
Yeah, and I would say, just listening to James and the overall cost structure, ingredient and processing is one big part of the overall equation. But, also think about packaging. For us, that was something that was an eye opener for me, because I had these grand dreams of this great bar-like experience with different layers. And then you start doing the math on that, and suddenly the packaging is more than the product itself. So take into account all aspects of that finished product, finished experience, as well as some of those downstream factors when it comes to logistics and distribution. And if the co-man that you're working with has those capabilities, understand what the pick and pack and all those other associated costs would be if they're fulfilling some of the direct distribution, or if they're shipping to brick and mortar, what that cost structure looks like. Or even what I mentioned before, if you're doing direct and you're using them for that, if they're located in California and they're shipping all the way to New York for a good chunk of your orders, then that could kill your margin over time. So you have to look at the complete business model and operations holistically to really get a sense of like how you can make a profit and be successful with whatever you're putting out there.
Awesome. We're gonna have if people can share questions that I know Dan has about 18 that he wants answered. This is great. I have one just basic question for you guys. Are there different types of co-manufacturers? Like, are there people that just are going to do production? Are there people that are going to help you with the sourcing? Or talk to me about that.
Yeah, there are different kinds of co-mans, and that's where a lot of this initial research comes into play. Going through these databases, meeting some of these co-mans at these pet conferences, through referrals. They all have perhaps slightly different capabilities, even when it comes to processing. Some specialize in dehydrated, freeze-dried formats. Others can do almost anything. So it is just a matter of taking a complete inventory of their skill sets, looking at their other customers, what you see or what they're willing to share, and kind of going from there.
Yeah, and I would just add on, and Rich, you touched on it a little bit. Our first co-man didn't have any warehousing capabilities or any sort of pick and pack capabilities. So what we were doing was they were producing for us, and then we were essentially shipping it from the East Coast to outside. I'm out of Chicago, so outside of Chicago to warehouse. The co-man that we're working with now has a large warehouse, has the ability to do direct-to-consumer pick and pack, so small 1-2 item picks as well. So that has saved us a ton of money from a logistics standpoint. So I think thinking through the 360 approach on what you're looking for on how to bring your product to market is another thing to be thinking about on the capabilities that the co-mans offer.
Yeah, and on that same question, I just lost my thought.
No worries.
It's going to come back to me.
Yeah.
So this point, there probably isn't the perfect co-man. Now, everyone will have a little bit of warts or a couple things that you would love for them to do, but it's just not within their current capabilities or wheelhouse. So just know that maybe not immediately as you grow, if you have additional needs, you'll probably have to build that complete partnership picture with other needs over time. And that's something when you're doing a side-by-side, if you do have multiple opportunities to choose a handful of co-mans, you can look at the pluses and minuses and then figure out for you at that point in your development, what might be the best choice for you.
So Dan has another question. Would you recommend a commercial kitchen for initial trials in small batches? And then also, what is the minimum budget that is needed to start a pet food product like yours?
Yeah, I can take it. I think the it depends piece of that, Dan, is where you're looking to bring your product to market, at least in my perspective. We had every intention to bring it directly to the food, drug, mass channel rather than going into independent pet. The challenge with a commercial kitchen for us was that our first order was, I think, 150 stores. So there was no way for us to actually go produce at scale for an order like that and make it and keep it economical. And then from an initial trial standpoint, Rich touched on this earlier, but the machinery is always going to look different based on your commercial kitchen to full scale manufacturing. So even if you do those trials, you're still going to have to run a trial with that machinery with your manufacturer. So what we chose was we did the initial trials just at home. Now, granted, I think we have a little bit, somewhat of an unfair advantage, just given that my co-founder is a product developer. So she's able to take what she did in her own personal oven, understand the different machinery that the manufacturer has, and understand like what will change with water activity and bake times and things along those lines. So, but ultimately, as I talked about, we still needed to go and do that trial. So for us, it was more a scaling piece on why we just skipped over the commercial kitchen. And then I'll just hit your other question, Dan, around did you always know we were going to go co-man? Absolutely. We knew that our expertise, my expertise was kind of the retail environment. My co-founders was product development, but our expertise was not sourcing, inventory management, operating machinery, anything along those lines. So we knew to get this off the ground in a cost-effective way, we had to go through a co-man.
Yeah, and I'll add to that just based on our experience. So I mentioned we did start with a commercial kitchen. For us, it was less about looking at its commercial applicability and what was next. It was more about creating a prototype for our fundraising and investors and going through that exercise, like looking at the formulation and the integrity of that recipe, making sure it's something that we had high confidence in to take the next step. But then, as I mentioned, those tears on the line, seeing that the product wasn't quite working the way that we thought on the small scale, that's just, something to kind of keep in mind if you do plan to scale considerably. And then the other thing I'll just mention is a lot of commercial kitchens, especially those that work with human to make human foods, won't work with pet food companies.
Yeah.
Even if the ingredient spec is human grade, so to speak, just the perception that they're working with a pet food company is something that they don't want, because then it could impact their other human clients and customers, or label them for other companies that might want to use their facilities and their expertise. It's weird, but it's a perception thing. So that is something to just be aware of. It was something that we were surprised with too when we were going out. Really hot natural foods community here in Boulder. There's a lot of commercial kitchens, but as soon as they said, "Oh, you're a pet food company," not interested. It's just something that you may face if you decide to go that route.
And then I'll just add, because I realized I skipped over the minimum budget question. So we were incredibly scrappy in the beginning, just because we were bootstrapping the company. I would tell you that a lot of the budget actually didn't go to the manufacturing. It went to the branding, the packaging, the trademark, that. But basically, to go from zero to our launch, which our launch was, like I said, it was about 200 stores. We were right in the ballpark of about $100,000 is what, give or take, somewhere right around there is where what we had put in to basically have that product sitting on. We launched in a retailer in Texas called H-E-B, so sitting on H-E-B shelves was right around that amount.
How many SKUs was that?
Let's see, we started with 5. We launched with 3.
Okay, and so that the 100,000 was for 3 different flavors or 3 different.
Yeah, 3 SKUs, but also all of like the legal setting up the LLC, doing like the branding was a lot of it. Like, so logo creation, what is like your brand attributes, the packaging. And that's another thing I would say, ask your co-mans, especially as you're talking to them. Like, we got a lot of our initial packaging help through our co-mans. So they're also, for me, like a great source that I always just go to as I'm starting searches on ancillary parts of the business, to ask them where I should go. They have a lot of pre-existing relationships. So that's something else that, as Rich was talking about, kind of the questions to be asking, I definitely throw that on there just to see like how well connected they are and can help you as you continue to scale.
And so, James, a follow-up question. As you experiment with new flavors and designs and whatnot, how much are you budgeting for launch now that you've gone through this cycle a couple times?
I wish I could tell you that I had this cycle nailed. To one of Rich's earlier points on be prepared to get bumped, we're going through the getting bumped process right now. So I would say we thought that it was going to be in like the tens of thousands of dollars, kind of to have everything ready to go. A little bit lesser than that. We're in the bump phase, so we might be having to expedite a few things, which will increase our costs and whatnot. So yeah, I do not want to act like I'm an expert in working with co-mans whatsoever.
And Dan has a question there. So a different Dan. Do you always assume a co-man, or do you ever consider doing any internal manufacturing capability? Have you thought about buying equipment and that kind of stuff?
It's really expensive to make that investment in that kind of infrastructure until you get to a certain point of revenue and volume. So for us, we're 10 steps behind James in many ways because we don't have any market traction at the moment. But even if we did go through a year cycling through, and if we were getting some good lift, I don't see something like that making sense from a unit economic standpoint until we have a considerable amount of distribution, reach, volume. I mean, I don't know how you feel, James, with you looking at your long-term plans, but I think co-mans are a necessary part of this scale-up process, and it's something that more than likely would be part of anyone's roadmap for the foreseeable future. For years.
100% agree with that. That's how we're looking at it as well.
Dan, the other Dan, says, how difficult is it to switch co-mans for pet product? It's super difficult for human products, but how difficult is it for pet products? On one side, pets may be less concerned about color and texture, but could be very sensitive to raw materials of the product that may occur during the processing.
Yeah. Rich, you probably will have a little more on this one, given that you have some challenges, but I can tell you for us, what is incredibly important is one, if they're willing to work with us with our upcycled ingredients. Most co-mans aren't used to the ingredients that we're working with, so that makes things somewhat challenging because our formulations are a little different than what they're used to, and kind of Rich's earlier point. So I would say that keeps us and the switching costs a little higher. The other thing that's tough is nailing your texture. So for us, we're a soft baked. I went in not fully understanding the full kind of palatability for dogs, and through actually my time with Assad and the Leap group and being able to connect in with the kinship team and doing palatability testing, making sure that our consistency is spot on, being more soft than having a crunchier or a harder kind of baked feel to it. So that has actually taken us 5 or 6 full production runs to truly nail that we feel really good with. So that is another one that would be really difficult for us to then go switch to another co-man. I think it would just be another learning process that would take us months to get accomplished.
Rich, someone's asking.
Yeah, I think about crazy background. I'll share that.
Why don't you answer the current question, then we can get to that one as well.
I'll just add really quick. Because of our novel format, 9 out of 10 co-mans just rejected us outright. They're like, "No way, Jose. This isn't something that is something that we're willing to go on this journey with because it is too disruptive." So for us to switch, we do have a handful now that through that journey and that. Just having all these introductions and conversations that now we have on our bench, but it's not an easy process, and it's not easy for us to find another alt, I think. My background isn't in pet food. It's not in biotechnology. It's in advertising. So this has been quite a bit of a learning curve for me over the last couple of years, just to understand this industry, the business, and microbial fermentation, becoming a scientist. But I would say for all of you, you probably are on this call or you're getting in this business because you have a passion for pets, dogs, cats, animals. You see an opportunity to do it better or different or something that's more valuable. And if that conviction is here, you'll find a way. Just keep doing this, making connections, being part of this community, and taking some advice, maybe not from us on this call. Don't blame us if it's but you'll find your way to make it a reality. I'm sure of it.
Any other questions? We got about 10 minutes left. I know, John, I know you're on the line and you have a bunch of experience. I don't know if you want to add anything. Feel free to add something if you want. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but.
Well, I grew up in a pet food plant. Not many people can say that. So if you have a specific skill set that you need from a team. We have a great team that does this. We actually help startup founders all the time kind of work through these processes and interface with other co-manufacturers. I was a co-manufacturer for 25 years, both in extrusion and baked. We have a lot of expertise in that arena. So I think what's been said is super relevant. The challenges of startups are very, very unique. And then you couple that with the pet food industry, which is a bit of a knife fight. And you find guys like this that have these great stories. So anything that you can do to expedite that process through expertise, people that you trust, that can be your advocate, that can introduce you to folks and help you work through these challenges and kind of give you a roadmap on how to do that. That's going to help you out tremendously. It is not for the faint of heart. Typically in my class that I teach at K-State on entrepreneurship, the first thing I say is, if I could talk you out of entrepreneurship, I will. So you have to want to do this despite all reason. And once you've made that commitment, then it's about, deciding what it is about your unique capability and exactly how you're going to approach the marketplace itself, and then having the right tools and financing and the critical attributes necessary to be successful. So anything we can do to help you, we will, but I don't want to take over the.
Yeah. Well, we are talking with John's team about doing another follow-up on this webinar, maybe sometime later this fall, but his contact information is earlier in the notes, in the chat window. nqv8.com is his website. So certainly reach out to him if you have any questions or comments. So thanks, John, for chiming in.
You bet.
Yael says, for James, we heard that you had some retailers drop off after the cost of goods came in higher than initial estimates. Did they come around once your costs were more in line? The question here is, as we are a hardware company and are set to manufacture in China, we may be hit with a tariff up to 25%. How receptive will the retailers be to these type of pricing surprises?
Yeah, I can give you my perspective actually more as a former buyer at Target than where I've been at with Shameless. I actually used to buy electronics. I bought TVs for Target. So I will tell you that tariffs are very well talked about. There's teams within any major retailer that you're talking to who will be very well aware. You will not be bringing up something that's new that they're not aware of. The question that I think you have to think through is, where do you want them to retail your product at? They're not going to be willing to shoulder the entire burden. They also don't, again, depending on the scale of the retailer that you're working with, they'll typically will not, let's say, launch your product at, I'm just going to throw it out there, $100, and then be willing in 6 months to then bring it down to $79 or $69, wherever you want to hit, because of the tariff. So I would, as a brand, think through where you want your SRP to be. Be willing maybe to eat some of the margin in the beginning, but you can have that conversation with the retailers. This isn't going to be anything new, and they've already most likely been working on what their strategy is to incorporate that tariff into their retail. So I don't know if that helped. If you have a follow-up or anything, and more than happy if you want to shoot me an email or give me a call. I can kind of talk you through a little bit more of the specifics on that.
And I will
that's really great, James. Thanks for sharing that. We will definitely have a couple of questions about that.
Cool. Absolutely.
Dan has a question. How important is texture for pet products? What else is important for them?
Yeah, I mean, just from my perspective, and that was some learning for me too. There is a science to palatability. Dogs perhaps do eat almost anything sometimes, including their own poop, right? but still, even with that, there is some parameters and do's and don'ts that from a recipe and formulary standpoint that you have to keep in mind to make sure that it's something that dogs will eat and then that will process well. So when when James was talking about the work with LEAP and feeding trials, even if it's not holistic and robust and you're not getting hundreds of dog respondents, going through that exercise and doing that diligence is really important so that you can understand, if the recipe is hitting the mark and having that data.
I would tell you, Dan, when we launched with our 5 SKUs, 3 of them were crunchy, 2 of them were soft baked. Both myself and my co-founder, both of our dog, we named the company Shameless Pets because they're both shameless and will eat anything. And we didn't really fully understand dog palatability. We have since very quickly moved to 100% soft baked because as we launched, our soft baked treats were the ones that we were getting rave reviews on. The crunchy treats we were getting, I would say 70% positive, but that 30% was way too high for us to feel comfortable moving it forward. And it ultimately truly came down to texture. Once we moved over to soft bake, which presented a few more challenges in recipe formulation and execution, we've kind of, we don't hear a lot of my dog won't eat your treats or anything along those lines. So for us, to me, it was a huge learning and a surprise around texture. And then, like I said, that's only been validated with the work that I've done with Kinship and through LEAP on texture plays a pretty important role for dogs.
Great. We're coming up on the end of the webinar. I'll just ask all 3 because I see John is up as well. Any parting thoughts?
The only thing I would say is you have my contact information. I am more than happy if you have any specific questions or even help in just navigating not just co-mans but bringing product to market. More than happy to jump on a call and help in any way that I can. So,
yeah, ditto. Same here, guys. That contact information. Use it as needed. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
John, I'll come to
you.
We
appreciate just the opportunity to be a part of it. I would say that don't be discouraged. There are a lot of companies in your situation that have grown into amazing entities over time. Blue Buffalo started in the loft of a barn in Connecticut. Bill Bishop didn't know anything about pet food at that time. Through conversations that we had and the exploration process, he was able to develop a pretty nice brand. So don't be discouraged about what you can do and can't do. You just need to have the right resources. And I would also say the co-packers as a whole are pretty great people, and they are up for a lot of challenges. You just have to communicate in a way that you understand their business as much as they understand yours, and design a system that works alongside. Most of the time they're giving you good advice. Not always, but most of the time they're saying it for the right reasons. So I would listen to them.
Thank you all so much for doing this. I hope that you had people enjoyed the webinar. We will be sending out the slide and a link to the video. And then if you could also just let us know what your thoughts are. Again, this was our first time doing this, and we'd love to know your feedback and what other types of sessions you'd want us to run. And then if you, for those of you that are in the pet space, and our venture studio is accepting applications, and we'd love for you to apply. Yeah, thank you all for joining.
A quick plug for the venture studio, because I went through it. I would highly, highly, highly recommend any early stage company apply to LEAP. It took our business, expedited it tenfold on thinking through our branding, our messaging hierarchy. And then Assad, a plug for you. He is like the Mr. Connector. So I hit up Assad almost weekly with challenges that we're facing. And he's able to just listen, understand, and then connect into his network. So highly recommend applying for the program.
Thanks, James. Your check is in the mail.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye.
James.